Now we can go now. Well, first, Aaron, I would like to welcome you to my podcast, which is Michael's Weekly Perspective, and it's very chilly here. And the thank you for come to the podcast. It's great that you can join me for a 45 minute of talk about how you started the podcast, and that's all.
Sure. Well, hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good middle of the night, wherever you're listening to Michael's Weekly Perspective. This is a great podcast that Michael does, and I really want to let all your listeners know and let the world know, of course, that I was truly touched by the fact that you started your own podcast simply because of Aaron's show. And you guys on Aaron's show on my side of the channel definitely are familiar with my show. And I was just really inspired by that. That just really amazed me and really touched me. I'm a teacher by trade, so anytime that a student, or in your case, you, a friend, a colleague, does something simply because I do it. Of course, just because someone else does something, that doesn't mean that doesn't mean you need to do it. But I certainly found it incredibly inspirational that you took the initiative yourself to simply start a podcast. And I'm really enjoying Michael's Weekly Perspective. So yeah, thank you for having me on your show today.
Oh, thank you. And first of all, before we get into difficult talks, we should. I think it would be better for you to start to introduce yourself, like where are you from, and stuff like that.
Sure. Well, so my name is Aaron, and I am the host of Aaron's show. But of course, I'm blind. I'm a teacher by trade. I am living somewhere in the world in an undisclosed location. And I teach students from all over the world English as a second language. And that's basically what I do. I'm a teacher online somewhere. I take care of my dog, Nani. And when I'm not here, I enjoy, recording podcasts and listening to other people's podcasts. That's what I do.
And what school did you went to?
Oh yes, I went to Goucher College, where I have hold a BA in International Relations.
Nice. Yeah, that's interesting that degree to have. And I'm still a high schooler, by the way.
Right.
So are you blind yourself?
Yes.
Great, great.
Since birth.
That's what I have. And talk about your job. That like, who do you primarily work with, and how do you
Well,
do the job?
sure. I work with students from all over the world. Many of them are from the Middle East. Many of them come to me because they need to learn English as a second language to, for the most part, get a better job themselves or obtain a higher level of education. And that's basically how I do my job. I work for Company X, and Company X has a platform where you can talk. It's similar to Skype, basically.
Nice. Virtual instructions.
Yes, or the online teaching, or e-learning as it's called.
That's interesting. And did have you struggled before when doing your job? Like
Are you
all the
ask are you
barriers.
sure. Are you asking if I struggle when I work, or are you asking have I struggled before I started working?
Have you struggled before when you started working? Like have you struggled while you were, doing your job?
Sure. I think, of course, I think there are always struggles with any career, even a career you love. Some students, love me, some hate me, some, are confused. All of them don't speak English perfectly. So all of that together is a struggle. Yes.
And do you speak second language?
I do. I speak English and I speak French. Je parle français.
Nice. Yeah, I also speak second two languages. I speak English and Mandarin Chinese.
Right.
Yes. So what made you to start a podcast? Like,
So, I was listening. Well, I think it was several. I think it was several. I forget exactly what it specifically was that really, really made me want to do it. I think it was a lot of things. I think that one of the issues that I have spoken about this on my show, and I don't know if you intend on talking about this on your show, but one thing that I've noticed lately is a lot of blind people around the world, and certainly in America, our country, um, are just are just not getting the support that they deserve. And what I mean by that is that there are just not enough, in my opinion, there are not enough good podcasts and good teachers and just people who truly want to help people who are blind, but in a normal and modern, 21st century way. And I'm a little concerned. I have to tell you, listeners, that I'm a little concerned about the way that things are going for a lot of blind people all over the world, because I fear and I'm concerned that the blind community in the world is simply not functioning where they possibly could be. Now I understand and accept that there are barriers and limitations, and those will always be there. But I don't want to sound like I'm telling people to kind of work a little bit harder. But yeah, I kind of think we need to push ourselves a little bit more as a community. And I hope that that's what my podcast as an educational tool was going to do. And then I did some research about, well, how do you actually create an audio file of your thoughts? How do you actually set it up? And I did some research about the different, platforms that are out there. And Anchor, where we host our show, really is the best one with the tools and the
Definitely.
features and there are other ones. And there are other things that you can do with a podcast once you start getting a lot more listeners. When we move up our podcast a lot more, there is a website I found out about just a couple of days ago. But I couldn't justify using it until we both start getting our listeners up, start seeing, okay, on this video you have, your first 1K views. Once I see that, then I would start to actually think about this other way to get the podcast really moving. But until then, what I focus on is quality. I focus on educating the world and trying to help people with every episode, and try to do it in an entertaining and enjoyable way. And that's my hope. I have many dreams and many hopes, but that's definitely one of them in the podcasting.
And do you have previous experience on internet broadcasting or equivalent, something equivalent?
Sure. I would say yes, in a sense, because of my teaching. I've been teaching for 4.5 years, and I've only been doing the podcast for like a couple months, off and on as I go along. So I'm someone who was always fascinated by the radio and always fascinated by broadcasters and TV shows, and I always kind of saw myself as a TV show, as like a TV host kind of. And I think that being a teacher online, you kind of are like a broadcaster because you're sharing your message. It's knowledge that you're sharing, but it's a message. So it kind of is like you kind of are hosting your own show in a sense. So yes, I think that my public speaking and my interest in educating other people, and my knowledge of the fact that there are so many people who need more knowledge, I think all of that combined together has certainly helped me in my motivation to be a podcaster.
That's interesting. And you discovered Anchor. Like, when did you discover this piece
That
of
I don't
software?
That I don't really know. I tell you, I do most of my research through Facebook and YouTube. Typing in questions, keywords. Research, basically Facebooking and YouTubing until I stumble across the right things. Um, and yeah, and that's the one that really is geared towards beginner podcasters. And then it doesn't really matter what level you are. If you have listeners and keep talking, you can keep building up your product over time.
Oh,
Exactly.
yes. It's easy
Hmm.
to use and voiceover accessible. I,
Extremely.
yeah.
Hmm.
But one thing that this piece of app doesn't support is that well is the like basic audio editing. Like, if you want to cut some segment, you have to basically. it involves a lot of slide and tap,
Yeah, I
and
know.
you
I
can't really do
that's
that.
it's that gets and that is frustrating. I agree with you, and I noticed when I was trying to drop in some sounds or put my ad on my Anchor commercial at the top. I noticed that you have to kind of, it's like adding little ingredients. When you're making a recipe, you got to do it. Okay, a little cup of this, little cup of that, and you have to put it together step by step by step by step. I'm suspicious about that. I think it's set up that way, Michael, because I think
Yes.
it's designed for beginners. I'm sure, and I will tell you that you can. Why I'm not going to. I don't want to, and I don't need to. You can spend a lot of money and a lot of time on much more advanced software that probably does all of those things for you at a much higher rate of speed. I think Anchor is truly geared for the beginner who doesn't know about editing, who's going to typically make more mistakes and typically need to throw out more of what they say in the first place. But
Oh,
yes, you're
yes.
yeah, I noticed it too. It's not your imagination. You're right. It's exactly what it is.
Yes. And luckily, I come over the struggle by I have a little bit of eyesight, so I use
Oh, you
that.
do?
Yeah, I use, my eyesight to trim some audios that I think it's worthless to be in the podcast. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and I have done that, and it's very effective.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And you know what? And I don't make a big deal of editing because I want it to be natural. I don't want to get into podcasts where I do a lot of editing work because I just want it to be real, and I want people to hear reality. I want this to be a realistic and authentic experience. That's just very natural and very normal for people, and I think that's something that our market needs. We need something that's a little bit more normal and a little bit more like just natural.
Definitely, definitely. And I totally, truly enjoy the Anchor app. Once I remember you were like inviting me to your show on August 25th, and using the Anchor app. That's one thing that
Well, excuse you for not coming then if it was the 25th of August. You haven't come. Why am I talking to you then?
yeah, yeah.
Well,
The
if you remember, then you have to come back on my show then if it's important enough to you to remember the 25th of
Yeah,
August.
it was a Sunday. It was one of those features that's in me that people basically find impressive, that I can say exact day and day and
Oh,
year.
don't you? No, 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 no. I don't get ahead of yourself. I can catch up with you.
Yeah.
I can impress you. I can disturb you too. Trust me.
Yeah. So, yeah, you were like inviting me to your show, but
Yeah,
due to my lack of technology, that my
yeah.
technology wasn't that functional. It was an iPhone 5S running the latest update of Anchor, so it's having a little glitch. So,
You know what I've discovered though? I think Skype is a lot better because I'm able to stream on two platforms. I'm able to publish this to YouTube and to Anchor. And I notice, and I will tell you that I get a lot more views on YouTube than I've ever gotten on Anchor. So YouTube is a lot stronger. YouTube
definitely.
is a much more robust system as far as getting your message out there. Now, of course, this Anchor is growing. I'm in more groups on Facebook now. I'm inviting more people into my show. It's just a step by step thing. But yeah, I think I would always stick with Skype now because you can always do two sides of every story. You got to have the YouTube, you have your YouTube audience, and then you have the Anchor audience. And I think if we do this enough times, then we'll start to see the real positive results in the end. Is how it works.
Yes, and the good thing about Anchor is that once you have like the certain amount of listeners, the company itself would distribute your show to popular podcast establishment such as Spotify and Apple Podcast, and
Well, as a
yeah,
matter of fact, you guys can listen to Aaron's show on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Radio Public. Yeah, exactly. I'm on a lot of those. I'm not on Apple yet. Um, but until I start, and I think I know how to do it now. I think I know how I would get there. But until I get the views, until I get my ratings up and or a strong enough show, there's no sense in me spending the energy on trying to do it.
yeah,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and Anchor also allows its host or the person who's using the app to distribute their podcast manually by using the Anchor's RSS feed.
Well, I guess. Yeah, you can share the episode after you're done. Yeah, you can. You can post your own episode. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's
Exactly.
one of the things that I really like about, having this sense of freedom to publish the podcast. And I know a friend of mine told me before that once a person transferred their podcast to their own website, they can't bring the sounds and jingles, music and jingles with them to their own website, and eventually it will leave a big hole and to the podcast. So yeah, that's one disadvantage.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I'm following that, and I don't know what you mean there. But yeah, maybe I don't know. I mean, so for example, like today, what I'm going to do is first I'm gonna get this. I'm gonna pull the. And it kind of depends on what order I feel like doing it. Usually, I just like to get it up onto YouTube first because that takes longer, and that's a little bit more annoying and more time consuming. And once I post on YouTube, then I start getting YouTube views on this show, and then I'm going to pull and then of course, if it's okay with you, I'm going to pull the audio from this recording and then put it into Anchor, so that basically this is going to be like an episode of Aaron Show, but I'm going to put in quotation marks. I'm going to quote Michael's Weekly Perspective. So it's like I'm like doing an appearance episode on your show basically, and then
Yeah,
viewers will hear it on
yeah,
that too.
that kind of makes sense because some famous YouTubers on YouTube, they goes across to other YouTubers show and they talk
Right.
about things that they like. So that kind of makes sense.
Right. And the idea that listeners should know about podcasting is you just have to enjoy doing it. If you do it enough times well, if you do it enough times over a period of years posting quality, then eventually the right person, some other YouTuber stumbles across it, because the stronger your video is, the higher probability that it gets recommended in people's recommendation feed, and then other people stumble across your material, and that's the idea basically of how this is all supposed to work. Hmm.
Definitely, definitely.
Yeah,
And that's how podcast works. And
basically.
yeah, yeah. That's interesting that you say that, and that's going to be the next question that I'm asking.
Oh, the next question you want to know is what advice do I have for? What's the question?
Oh, yeah, that is the question. So, do you have any since I have some errands to run so I have to end this episode quickly. So, do you have any advice to the listeners?
My advice is simple. Find something that you love to do, and find a way to do it well, and get and be and find ways of gathering knowledge about the world, and motivate yourself to learn about what's going on all over the world, and have a great time doing it.
Definitely, that's a very nice advice, and I can totally agree with that. To gather information and start doing what you want to do.
Right. Right.
Yes,
Exactly.
that's how
Exactly.
I started my podcast, was
Right.
to, have a resource with me, and then I compile some of those resources and then just do it.
Yep. Yep.
Like,
Exactly.
yeah,
Hmm.
like Dr. Seuss once had a book called All the Places You Go, and yeah,
Right. Right.
yeah,
Exactly. Hmm.
yeah. Thank you, Aaron, for joining me for 20, 21 minutes of discussion, and it's great that you devoted your time, and thank you so much.
And I want to take this time to thank all of the great listeners of Michael's Weekly Perspective. It's a great podcast. You should catch it on Anchor anytime, and you should go to the Facebook page for Michael's Weekly Perspective And definitely follow his show because he's doing a great job. And of course, as we like to say on Aaron's show, thank you for listening wherever you are in the world. And we're so glad you tuned in today. Have a good day today and a great day tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you. And
Always
folks,
welcome, everybody.
all right, that is all for this edition of Michael's Weekly Perspective.
Okay.
All right.